national nonprofit that supports affordable housing efforts throughout rural America. Since 1971, HAC has provided below market financing for affordable housing and community development, technical assistance and training, research and information, and policy formulation to enable solutions for rural communities. Welcome to today's webinar, where we hope to help you learn more about Rural Data Central. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Lance George is the Director of Research and Information at the Housing Assistance Council. With more than 20 years of experience, Lance leads the organization's research, data, and information efforts. Lance works at the intersection of housing, research, and data to help Americans who have quality and safe homes understand and care about those who do not. Lance's research encompasses a wide array of issues and topics related to demographics and housing. Dan Stern is HAC's Communications and Outreach Manager. His responsibilities include managing and updating HAC's website and communications and coordinating HAC's outreach efforts. He also works on HAC's IT and tech strategy. Stephanie Nichols is a senior housing specialist at HAC with deep expertise in affordable housing and rural community development. She leads HUD-funded technical assistance and capacity building initiatives that support nonprofits in navigating complex funding landscapes and delivering impactful housing solutions. Her work focuses on strengthening organizational effectiveness, improving program outcomes, and fostering long-term resilience across communities. Dr. Keith Wiley is a senior research associate at HAC. He has worked extensively with many datasets in an effort to better understand where, when, and how development patterns occur. Keith holds a master's in public policy from American University and a PhD in public policy from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And now I will hand the presentation over to Lance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion. And thank you for joining us in this overview and introduction of Rural Data Central, this important discussion. My name is Lance George, and I'm the Director of Research and Information at the Housing Assistance Council. And I, along with the team at HAC, are really excited to introduce Rural Data Central today. The team is going to go over and provide you some kind of overview and highlights of the functions and some of the utilities of Rural Data Central. Before we get started, I really did want to present two overriding themes that help guide our development of Rural Data Central. And these are going to be very brief. The first of which is data is central. Now, I know that sounds like a play on words, but it's increasingly apparent that data is essential for any business operation and also for mission-based and nonprofit organizations and those in rural communities. But as many of you know all too well, and I'm going to use my parlance here, data is just more difficult in rural areas. It's just harder. Utilizing or accessing small-scale data and information oftentimes lacks quality, reliability, precision, and sometimes is not collected, it's suppressed, not collected at all. And trust me on this, data can be expensive and time, resource, and intensive effort for those of you working with it. And I know many of you are focused more on providing direct services to your clients and your customers. And so we hope to provide more assistance with the data provision with Rural Data Central. Now, the second larger theme that I wanted to present, and I think this is actually more important, is that rural people, places, communities, practitioners, stakeholders, and decision makers deserve access to high quality data too. You deserve access to high quality data. At the Housing Assistance Council, we do many things. We do many things in the Research and Information Department, but I like to boil that down and say we provide really high quality data, research, and information to help inform strategies and solutions for your community. You're the experts. You know what your community needs. We just try to enable that. And we think that ethos is imbued in Rural Data Central. We've combined a lot of disparate data sources into one easy to use, relevant, and accessible data tool. HACC has been producing research and information for more than 50 years, and we think this tool is just the next logical iteration of that evolution in history and process. So I'm going to end on one final note and note that data is or are, I'm a data R person, oftentimes in the plural, is dynamic. It's increasingly expanding and getting larger, and it's changing. And we hope that the development of Rural Data Central is also dynamic. So look for updates to the data and new features and tools as the data platform progresses. So with that, I'm really excited. Thank you for joining your interest today in Rural Data Central. I'm excited to see what we can do together. Now I'm going to turn it over to the team to give you more insights onto some of the functionality, features, and resources within Rural Data Central. So thank you.
All right, hi everyone. That's my cue. So I'm going to show you some of the top level functionality of Rural Data Central. I just added a link to the chat, but the website is ruraldatacentral.org. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see it as well. So this is the website, ruraldatacentral.org. There are several different ways to get there, either from the HACC website or just go directly to it. And as you come into the site, you see a bunch of different elements. The top level menu gives you access to, we duplicated this. This is all of the different modules of data that you can access. This link here, research, takes you to the HACC website and all of our other research products. The Want More Data link is allows you to contact HACC, and if you want some more specialized data, you can reach out to us and we can try to figure out if that is something we can do. It really depends on our availability. And what is rural is there are multiple different definitions for rural out there. HACC wants you to know what we mean when we're talking about rural and the various definitions we'll be using on this site. And then in order to access the data on this site, we have put a login requirement here. So if it's your first time using the site, this is how you would get into it. You would go to the login button. If you've already created an account, it'll take you right through. If you need to sign up, you click on this link down here to sign up now. And this will walk you through a little sign up wizard. The only thing that's a little confusing about this wizard is that you have to enter your email address and then press this button to send a verification code, and then go check that email to get the verification code. And once you have that, you can enter all this other information, but you won't be verified until you've sent in a verification code. It's a little bit of a different order than we're used to, but it still works, and you get those emails relatively quickly. So sign up, and this way we have some idea of who's using the tool. Don't worry, we're not going to spam you with any emails or with lots of emails or anything. We want to have some idea of what's going on. And then once you get to the site, there's then all of these different modules. Now, Keith is going to spend a lot more time breaking down exactly what it is you're seeing here, but each one of them has a little update on, or a little description of what is in each data module. And just one thing to be aware of, the data, the measurements or the indicators that you see in both the rural people and places and society modules are very similar data. It's just a matter of whether which data set we're using. Rural people and places is census data, and society is American Community Survey data. Now there's probably more nuance there, but that's the long and short of it. There's a few maps here for you to take a look at. These are not interactive. They're just look at some elements that we have on the site. And then obviously you might have some questions about all of the data, all of the terms and what have you here. So that's why we have this about the data section. The data dictionary gives you a breakdown of every single indicator on the site and what it means when you're looking at that particular source data or particular measure. Data sources and limitations just lays out which sources we've used, and we have a data reliability indicator, which Keith will talk more about. This explains what that is, and then this just goes through defining rural is the same link as above. Geography goes through the definitions of our geography. And About Hack takes you to the Hack website where you can learn more about us. And a couple elements here. If you need to reach out to us, the login is the same as above. If you need to reach out to us, this is a form you can fill out. Frequently asked questions about the website if you need to know some more about how this works. Asking for more specialized data products, you would reach out to us from this site. And tutorials gives you an overview of how to do a lot of the stuff that we're going to cover in this webinar. So hopefully no one here will need the tutorials link, but it's there in case you do. And with that, I believe I will hand it over to Keith. And I see we do have some questions in the, or a question in the chat. We're going to address questions toward the end of the webinar. So thank you already for putting something in, and we will get to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for coming. My name's Keith Wiley. As they said, I'm usually the data guy here. I'm the one that whenever you contact Tech, I usually get back with you, and I like working with data, and I worked with the team on this, so it's really a kind of labor of love. I love data. I always say that it's central to helping you tell your story, right? And so, like Lance said, I think it's important. You all know what you're trying to do, and you just need the data that'll help you do that. Like, if you live in an area where you have heating fuel and it's going to be a bad winter and the prices go up, but the data can help you say there's this many households use it. So maybe it can help with the LIHEAP program, or you may know that there's a lot of units without plumbing, and this data can help you say there's a lot of units without plumbing in this census tract or this part of my community. And so again, I'd just like to thank you for coming, and I'm going to work through here an example where I
Keith,
just
I realize or Stephanie pointed out that I skipped Stephanie.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. See,
Stephanie will lend some context to the overall purpose of this. So I'm terribly sorry, Stephanie. Now that you're hand waving me away, I'm going to make you talk.
Okay. Keith, are you good with that? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go ahead. No,
are you on a roll?
Go ahead. Yeah, no.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of context. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for being here and taking the time to explore Rural Data Central. You've seen how to set up your account and log in thanks to Dan. And in a moment, Keith is going to show you how to navigate the program and use all the platform and use all the features. But before that, I want to just take a few minutes to talk about how this tool fits into your work, especially if you're leading or supporting affordable housing efforts in rural communities. If you've ever had to gather data for a proposal or respond to a board question or explain what's happening in your region, you know how time-consuming it can be. The data exists, it's just scattered across different systems and not always easy to work with. Rural Data Central brings a variety of publicly available data sources together in one place. It's searchable, it's mapped, and it's built with rural users in mind. You'll find information on population trends and housing stock, income levels, mortgage activity, poverty, and more, all designed to help you find the numbers that support your work. So what can you do with it? Let's say you're working on a funding application. You might need to show that a high percentage of households are cost burdened, or that incomes haven't kept pace with rising construction costs. With Rural Data Central, you can pull data from your service area, download a chart, or make your case clearly to your funder. Whether you're applying for a competitive federal grant or small local program, strong data helps funders understand the need, and it builds confidence in your proposal. It might be also helpful when you're preparing for a board meeting. Maybe you're recommending a change in strategy or considering expanding into a new community. You can show how the population is shifting, where the vacancy rates are tightening, or how incomes compare across nearby counties. Having current visual data makes a conversation more focused and productive. For long-term planning, it helps you test assumptions. Are the household sizes changing? Is mortgage activity slowing down? Are there fewer new construction homes than you expected? Having that information helps you plan with clarity. But it's also useful for conversations with partners and local officials. When you need to show what's happening in your region or how conditions vary between counties, you can share a visual and quickly get everyone on the same page. And sometimes it's as simple as answering a quick question. What's the poverty rate in your county? What portion of household are owner occupied? You don't need to dig through 5 websites to find it. It's all here. So whether you're building a proposal, planning your next steps, briefing your board, or learning about your region, Rural Data Central helps you get there with confidence. As Keith walks through the demo, please drop your questions in the chat. We're collecting them and we'll answer as many as we can after the presentation. We are proud to share this tool with you and we look forward to seeing how you put it to work, whether it's through planning, funding, strengthening how you communicate your impact. Thanks again for showing up for today's webinar. And now I'm going to turn it over to Keith again.
Thanks everybody, and thanks Stephanie. That was great. That's really kind of, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Like it's I think it has a lot of uses, and I'm just going to kind of work through some examples here, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. But yeah, that's generally, I'm the guy. Let me see right here. Here we go, and everybody should have my screen. And what often happens is we do a lot of work with a lot of groups from RCB to other groups who call in and stuff. So the way I'm going to go through this is just like use kind of examples that are relative to things that we have done here. And this case, we've done a lot of work in the Southeast. So I'm going to just use an example, Allendale County, South Carolina. And a lot of times we'll get groups and they'll want to do work like with mortgage and housing finance. And a lot of times what they'll want is data on like that we don't think there's a lot of lending that's occurring in our community. And the lending we do think is high cost and there's a high denial rate. And a lot of times what it is they want to work on an activity to address that, maybe down payment assistance or maybe, counseling or something to help people get loans. And so I'm just going to go through an example here. These are the same modules that Dan had showed, the 6 of them. In this case, we want Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, the mortgage data. So I'll just click on it. And again, and it's going to take me to right where Dan said. See, I've already had my credentials in. So when I go sign in, it should just take me there. It should just take a minute. But yeah, these are examples of kind of like areas where we've done stuff in. So you're going to come here to this base page here, and you'll see it says mortgage finance. And I'm just going to walk through the steps, and then I'll go into a little bit about how I might look at this. It's particularly if somebody called, like Stephanie said, people might call and want to know for a homeless count or something like that. But it'd say we're going to do home lending, and so we want to go to application status, and that would give us like whether the loans or what happens to an application. Is it originated, denied, approved but not accepted? And generally what we want to look at here is whether it's been the percent that originated and percent that are denied, because they wanted to explain what's going on in the housing market. So we wanted to go here. So we clicked on that, step 1. And step 2, we want to select the primary geography that we're going to go is at the county level, right? So then our screen pops up for step 3. And I'm going to work right through this, South Carolina. And I'll show you, we could just type the name in, but I'm used to this. And Allendale is A, so my last name is Wiley, so I was always at the end. So this one it's easier to do it this way. And so then we've done both those steps. And then the last step here is the year we want, right? And we have Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data going back to 2005, which is really cool. But in this case, we just went to 2023. So what you see here is there weren't a whole lot of loans in Allendale County, but this is the U.S. comparison. And you can see it was a much lower origination rate, right, than the nation as a whole. And sometimes a nice function I like on this is then you could just go to 2022 and you can see, right, if it's consistent over the years. I think that's an important thing because there will be fluctuations. But so you can see that there's a much higher share of the loans that are just out and out denied and a much lower share that are originated. And again, this will be something that you'll know, right, because you'll know your community, but it'll add more heft to your argument, so to speak, when you can cite that. And down here, we got a chart and it just shows us the category, the numbers for each category. And we have a map over here. And if we click on, say, denied, then the map becomes active. But it's just we can zoom in, we can zoom out, but it's just going to show us the percent. And you can see here some. And speaking of where Allendale is, it's near Savannah, Augusta, and then right down in here, you can zoom in and out on the map. It can be helpful to let you know exactly where it's at, right? And if you wanted to download the data, you can see you can come right down here and you can click on more options and you can download it. Or we'll just do it this way. We could try this, right? We could do show as a table and we could do a screenshot of this, or we could snip it and then people could put that in a report, or we could actually export it, right? And most of the time, it's just going to give you the raw data. I usually use CSV, but you may want to use Excel. And then you could just do export and you would have the data gives you the counts for the area. And so let's go back. And then let's say that I wanted to come up here and choose another one. So let's go. So I know that there's not many loans, and what I would do then is say you wanted to look at the property type of loan involved again. So again, I go to the first one, I go to property type, just tell me the type of dwelling, because I know there's a lot of manufactured homes there. And so then I'm going to go to county again. I'm going to click South Carolina on down here. I went too far. And then you want to go to Allendale. And again, it's showing you that there's not many, but here are the ones and about 20% of them, or 1 in every 5, is manufactured homes. It's much higher than it is for the United States. And again, you could do this if you wanted to show a long-term pattern. You could show, and that might make sense, right? So you're saying there's not a lot of loans, there's large denial. Maybe that's related to manufactured housing. And then also another thing you would look at here let's go back again and let's go to high cost loans. And that's loans that have interest rates that are above a prime rate loan. So you think because there's a high denial rate in a lot of manufactured homes, there may be a large share that are high cost loans. So then I might go in here and I'm going to do the same thing again. I selected the high cost out of the category there. I go to South Carolina and I'm going to go to Allendale, and you see 33%, right? And again, this is the way I would analyze it. Like you're going to break it down. And it's nice as you can go back multiple years. And I think that's really powerful and allows you to see what's happening. Sometimes you'll get like a one-off, right? Because things are highly dependent on the financing, the markets, the interest rates and stuff, but it helps you kind of build a pattern, identify areas of need, and you always have the United States over here as a comparable, and I think that's nice. But what I also would do when we're using this data is maybe so we get the Allendale numbers and we pull them, we have them in a sheet, and we have the United States numbers, but then maybe we want to have a comparable just to show how that compares to the state. So you would just come up here to do this, and it's going to zoom out. We're going to go high cost, right? And we're going to come here and we're going to select South Carolina. And then we'll just do all of South Carolina, right? And it gives you the percent, which is much lower. But then we could also do rural. And as Dan had noted, rural, see it's much higher for rural is 14%. And you can do that. Then a lot of times what we'll do and what I will do is I'll make a comparable, right? And so then I'll have the group you're doing and I'll have it next to the state and then the nation. But this is the way you can pull that data. And again, you can do the multiple years. I think it's really useful, particularly things like the mortgage data, because it's hard to get that. And this has a lot of years, which is, I think, really, really powerful. But I'll go to another example. Now, if we wanted to get back, you could do this and pull one, or I just generally just click on this, right? And so we do this website, one thing about it that is, in addition to the fact that every time we update it, right, the data builds on the existing data. So when I add in soon the 2024 or 2025 data, it'll just build on the previous data that was there. Where our old website, it didn't do that. And another thing this has is it has much smaller geographies. And that can matter, right? It goes down, it has the tribal track and the census track. And we do a good bit of work like around the colonias and stuff like that. A lot of times you'll deal with a group that's only working in rural census tracts, or they're only working in certain census tracts because maybe it has colonia or something like that. So I'm going to show an example. And this I think can be really good if you only serve 2 or 3 census tracts. You can see variation between them and it can be very useful. So we click here, or this time I'm going to go to housing. So I'm going to click on the housing one, and you're going to get the same kind of thing, except for we're already logged in. We don't need to log in again, but we'll come here, right? And we'll use a similar step. And in this case, a lot of times we'll work with groups that are looking at affordable housing. And it may be that they're trying to identify areas where there's a large homeless presence. And a lot of times we'll look at issues like crowding, right? Or we're looking at a shortage of affordable housing, and we'll also look at crowding. So I come up here to the one and I look for occupants per room. And essentially, crowding means it has more than one person per room. And there's some more nuance there, but with the census, so generally more than one person per room is considered a crowded housing unit, right? And so let's say census tract this time. We work in the census tract in Texas. We're doing Hidalgo County, which is urban, but parts of it are still relatively rural, and it has colonia. So what we do, and this time when I come here, I'm just going to type in Texas because it'll get me closer. That's another way to do it, right? So now we're going to Texas. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want it to do that. Let me see if I can't, well, let me see if I can't go back. Well, I'll see if it'll. Hidalgo County. I'm just going to take this out here. Hidalgo. And then what you would do is you would type in your census tract number. And see here it's going to pop up. And we know we serve these census tracts. And I'll fix this screen in a minute. But see what we would want to do here is we want to look at the number of crowded units. And see, this shows us the number of crowded housing units. And then you can just tweak it and continue to go down and down and down to your level of geography. You can do the next census tract and the next census tract. And this way you can, if there's like 3 or 4 census tracts, you can choose the one that you're most concerned about, the one where you find the highest rate. And sorry about that. Let me see. I'm gonna add this again. And let me do another example of a related one. A lot of times we'll work with areas and they're working on a development activity. And so one of them is, say they're wanting to collect an economic measure. And again, what we would do in a case like this is I would click on it. And a lot of times in rural areas, one of the big things is like manufacturing is a big, like it's been in the news a lot lately. And so you want to show that there's a large manufacturing population near, afraid they're losing jobs and stuff. So again, it's the same kind of thing here, but I'm going to go on industry right this time. And I'm going to go to an area where I know there's a large manufacturing base. Just this isn't necessarily rural, but I'm going to go to a county, right? It's just like I did when I went to Allendale. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go to Ohio. And I'm going to go to this time Ashtabula, right? And so I want to look here and I get the manufacturing. See, it's 23% compared to 10% for the nation. And now you can go back to other ACSs, but they're overlapping, but you can kind of get percentages. You get similar pattern. But the idea would be that this data then would help you in making your case. And we deal with a lot of places maybe that say a sawmill is closing or a paper mill or something. And you want to show the decline of the base as far as some community development activities that you're working on. So it can be a real powerful tool. And again, you have the chart down here. And the map is, because this time it's right over the technically speaking, the boundary of the United States goes out into the lake half. But this is the kind of ways that I usually end up using the data for people. It's pretty simple. And again, you could go back this way, but I'll just stick with this. But these are the kind of the examples. It's pretty easy to use. But if you find anything or any technical issues with it, let us know. Another one is like federally assisted housing. We have data on that here. I think that can be important. A lot of times, and people ask us about USDA or HUD programs, particularly as it relates to their federally assisted housing stock. A lot of times there's preservation efforts or something, right? And you want to preserve units. So a good way to show that is if you show a large share of the units or government assisted, the affordable units, and therefore if you lose some, it's going to be an issue. So in this case, we've been doing a lot of work in Arkansas. So I'll just take Arkansas. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pick a county. In this county, I'm going to do HUD, the right here. And then I've been doing a lot of work in a place called Pope County. So I'm going to come over here, right here. And then we have 2 years so far. I'll probably do this one every other year. It comes from the subsidized housing. Let's go to 2004. So it gives you a count of the vouchers, the count of the Section 8, and that kind of information. And again, you could download it again with that function. But this data is going to, I think it gives you a good framework, particularly sometimes you just want to have an overall landscape of the housing stock that you have. And I think it's useful. I think it's very impactful. And it's always part of the story you're trying to tell. And for the HUD data, we have it down to the census tract or congressional district. But for the USDA data, it's the same data essentially as we used to put out in our report. Which we still do put the report out at the end of the year, the USDA RD programs. So you'll be able to get that data here, but it's state-based, like how many for certain programs are in Tennessee, as in California and whatnot. I'm going to go back one more time. And sometimes people ask us for information on homeless housing, and it is actually in here. We put the counts. They're just the raw point in time counts, but we did include them in our housing module this time. I'm pretty excited about it. We usually do some work also on our veterans website, which we will update soon. But you can see again, if you were to do that, you would come here for the homeless counts. And in this case, you know, you're probably going to do something like continuum of care. It's going to be if you know the continuum of care you're going to work in. But let's say I know the continuum of care, and let's say it's in California, right? And I want to go to the Paradise, the Butte County, and you can get accounts sheltered, unsheltered, and it's going to go back a lot of years, right? So you can kind of get the data going back all these years. And we don't have the percentages for this. We have the raw counts, and we just have the sheltered and the unsheltered. But I think it's can be important. A problem with that measure is it's oftentimes less than perfect because the continuum of care doesn't always fit your service area. But I think it's a nice feature, and it's really important, and it's data that can be very useful. And we're actually working too on our mapping function to make it more so that we can potentially show COCs as well. So this map would show like the continuum of care for the Chico Paradise County COC. And I want to show one or two more things here. And another thing that we often get asked about when we're doing housing reports for people, and I think this is a really good feature, is one of the better measures is actually whether or not an area is growing, right? Just absolutely. Is the population growing? And in rural communities, oftentimes that's not always the case, right? And so we have one here. We do have population change over the last 3 decades. Now, I would restrict this to just jurisdictions where it's like the nation, state, and county, because census tracts you won't get it because they change. And when you do rural, those aren't quite as meaningful, right? Because what's rural in 2010 is not rural in 2020. So it'll be a little different. But oftentimes we're going to get asked, so we go to population, and I get asked this. This is probably one of the best barometers you can get. And I'm going to do an odd one. I'm going to do Hidalgo County I want to do one that has an increase, right? So I'm going to just choose Hidalgo County and here, and going to come in here to state, and I don't know why I get thing for Texas, but I'll just do Texas. And then because Texas has a large number of counties, it's going to be best almost always to do something like this for Texas or Georgia or a place like that. But you see now I got it, and it tells you the population change, right? But then if I want to see what happened between 2010 and 2000, I see it there. And then if I want to go down to 2000, I see it here. And that is a really powerful thing because it gives you a look over the last several decades about how the population changed. I think that's, really powerful and important. I think it also helps explain your area. Because a lot of times in these areas, that's an underlying factor that's really important. And this is, as Dan had said, this the rural people and places is census tract. So it's based at the decennial census. So it's an actual count where if we come back here and go to this one here has much of the same data, but it's the ACS. So it's an estimate. And then when we go to a county estimate, and I'm going to do this one real fast because I can run on because I do love to talk data. So we're going to do education, and I'm going to do Allendale again. So let's say if you're in Allendale and you wanted to address you're trying to address the lending. You think there's let me clear this. You want to try to address lending, and you think that counseling or can improve it, and you think it can help people. So you want to show the educational attainment. So there's two things I want to show you here. One is you can see there's a much lower percent with a BA degree, right? And so that may be your call that like because loan products are very complicated and it's hard to understand. I don't really understand them a lot. So you can use this to say, well, one of the reasons why we want to help people is maybe people aren't aware, and a lot of this is done online, so we can help them with counseling, one, to get their budget in order, but then two, to actually be able to understand what they're signing because that's very difficult, right? But then you'll see over here, this is our reliability indicators, and we have it for the county and tribal track and congressional district. And down here is what that refers to. And so the green it means it's highly reliable. That's the coefficient of variation, and I'm not going to get into that, but it's less than 15%. The orange is reliable. It's between 15 and 29, and the red is very low reliability. And what that would mean is that it could be varied. It could be something where like the poverty rate's either 5 or 35%, right? So it's not very reliable. So we put that there as a cautionary thing that you might want to be aware of that the fact the numbers sometimes can be maybe not as reliable or as accurate, and that's due to sample size, and you have that in rural areas. But just you can notice that here, and that might be an issue here. But this is a good way to check that out is by looking for these measures that have it. We don't have it for the national and the state measure because those are an aggregate measure. So those are going to be much less error. So I don't want to drone on anymore because I just, I enjoy talking about it, and I enjoy talking about the data, and, I really enjoy the calls and working with the groups. And like Stephanie said, that's what this is about. I'd like for you to try it out. And if there's something you see, find, or some of your thoughts on it, just please let us know. And I'm going to stop sharing and quit rambling. And I hope it's been helpful. Yes.
Keith, this is Lance again. If you could continue sharing, because I just wanted you to highlight one other element.
Okay.
And just go to basically any module other than the federally assisted housing, like society, and just to illustrate the dynamic mapping as well. One little minor dynamic, which I think is a really powerful feature. And we'll make this easy and just go to the state.
Okay.
But if you click on just one, to make the mapping dynamic, if you just you have to click on one element within the data table. So click on one of those. And then you'll see it dynamically populates any map. And you can do that at almost all geography levels, not the census tract level, because it's just that would overwhelm the system. There are 80,000 census tracts. But that's one element that we did work on and included, has dynamic mapping. So to make a map populate at a larger level or any thematic level, you just click on the table and then the map will automatically populate. There's no way for it to populate. We don't have default settings. So I just wanted to highlight that one particular feature. There are many others that I go on to, but I think it's best maybe to get to some of the questions and entertain your questions. Thanks a lot, Keith and Stephanie and Dan. I would just have to say the team put a lot of effort and a lot of work into this. And we really, it was a labor of love, but it's been a long process, and we're really happy that it's coming to fruition and it has utility to the users. So we've got some really good questions queued up that I think Dan can help relay, but thank you for your interest in these insightful questions.
Absolutely. And Keith, you may want to reshare at a certain point because some of the questions may be easier to answer just by showing. But I think let's say, so Lance, you have answered this question, but it is one that came up a lot in user testing, and I think it's fair to answer it. You've answered in the chat, but let's address it. Can you save a set of geographies or like a 10-county region rather than reselecting those for each data search? And Lance, I'll let you field that one.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a great question, and it's something that we hear. We do think that we made advancements from the old rural data portal, which this is an advancement of the original data platform, or one of the data platforms, the rural data portal, into allowing us to save custom geographies. That's something we heard in rural areas. Oftentimes we'd hear from a stakeholder or practitioner that I have a multiple county service area. So we did enable the ability to create custom geographies at a whole range of levels. So you hit the control button, and then you click multiple counties or census tracts or states, and it will automatically aggregate and populate and calculate the data estimate for that area. We do not in this phase or in this stage have the ability to save custom geographies. We've heard that feedback and we are working on it. As I noted before, the platform is dynamic and we hope to have that enhancement because we've heard that a lot, but at this stage it's not available.
Yeah, I meant to show that when I had that. Like, it was like you can actually select like multiple census tracts, like kind of like Lance is saying, and you can it'll sum them up. But we're still working on it. But like my example for Hidalgo County, there it does it again. I don't know why it's doing that, but I don't know why it keeps zooming in. But you can select them, and if you push Control when you select the census tract, then if you keep clicking on them, it'll add them together.
Absolutely. So great. Thank you everyone for a great amount of questions. We'll hope to get to everything. And I guess one question, is there a way to see the data side by side to see year-over-year changes in the information? Or can you only select 1 year at a time? This is another functionality question. I think it's a very good question. But Lance, if you want to.
Yeah, and I'll try to take that, but I welcome from the team. So at this stage, you can only select 1 year at a time. But I do think the way the data are categorized is that, and Keith provided this in his illustration, you can very easily scroll between the years and see the estimates. But at this time, they're not a side-by-side comparison. It's just a vertical comparison where you can go down through the years and see the comparison dynamically.
There are several questions about whether or not we have certain data sets in here. The data sets around IRS migration data or cost burden, housing cost burden, crowded out data. Do you want to comment more broadly on data sets that are or are not in and what that means?
So we did pull together a disparate number of data sets here and whatever. So we appreciate those suggestions. We do not have, I noticed, the IRS data. We don't have that in the data set. You can find out more about the data sets in the About the Data section. It is largely populated with, and the Census Bureau does an amazing job. It's largely populated with publicly available data, but sometimes we found, and we heard from rural users in particular, that data is not as easily accessible as they would like. So we compiled many different disparate data sets into this particular platform. We do include data from the Census Bureau, multiple years of American Community Survey, 3 decades worth of the decennial census, as Dan noted, in the Rural People and Places module. So that's a lot of information that would take you quite some time to navigate through various other sites to find. So we have 3 decades of decennial census data, I believe 4 years of American Community Survey data going back to 2000, and we will include, we'll update and enhance those data when they become available, the newest data. We provide Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data from the FFIEC. There is data on homeless estimates, as Keith mentioned, and there's also data on federal and publicly assisted housing from U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So those are some of the corpus of the data sets, the 5 or 6 main data sets that we have, although we do have them in time series order for multiple years and decades. And I'll have to note on the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, we have data going back temporally almost 20 years of data, and very soon we'll have data from 2004 to 2024. So we have basically 20 years of data on the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. We appreciate those suggestions on other data to include, and we're always, as I noted before, Rural Data Central is built to be dynamic, and we hope to expand upon some of these really great questions and functionality questions, but also what's in Rural Data Central to make it usable and accessible for you and relevant.
Yeah,
And, go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
I was just going to say, you can get the ACS cost burden data if you come in here to the housing module. You can get it. You can get like rent as a percent of income. You can get cost burden. You can get the different estimates here for like rent or for everybody. And you can get the cost burden units this way. If you wanted to go for a certain geography, you could get them. But yeah, we don't have like like Lance said, the IRS tax data. And we worked with some of that before, but like, just the general file with the county stuff or like banking data and that we don't have that in here. But yeah, welcome the suggestions. But yeah, you could get it the cost burden going back through. You could get it by the renter or the owner or the combined, and it's a lot of times you do cost burden or severe cost burden, right? And so you can kind of get at it that way. Sorry, Dan.
Oh, no, no, Keith, another question was just, can you talk a little bit more about the reliability estimates or the reliability indicator and how it shows up with ACS data?
Yeah, we had this in our old website, and what we did was we were concerned that with some of the like the estimates, like I'll just try to pull a county up here that you would have you would have that some of the estimates measures had a large amount of error, like the margin of error that you'll see, and I'm just going to pull a county up that I know of, but I should have chosen the measure, but your structure is built here, and we'll go back there. But what we were concerned about was we were concerned that there's a wide margin of error, like what the estimate might say again, like some of the classic ones is that the median household income is $55,000, but it might be plus or minus 35,000, right? So that means it could be like 20 some or 90 some. So we added in this estimate here to give you a warning, and that's why it's red and green and yellow. And it's just to give the user a warning that, hey, this might not be, it could be pretty far flung. Like there's a wide margin. And this is pretty close here. These are all pretty good. I should have chosen another county. But like if it's green, it means it's highly reliable. Yeah, orange means reliable and red means low reliability, and some of them you can't count because the values are zero. But what we used was the coefficient of variation, which is a pretty standard calculation, and essentially it measures the amount of error relative to the estimate itself. And so if it's really high, then it's less reliable. Go ahead, Lance.
No, thanks, Keith. I really appreciate that question, and it's really insightful. And I would say I think I was once told never to use the term coefficient of variation in a presentation or you would lose everyone. But I think it's relevant, really important for this conversation. And this is, I believe, an enhancement or a feature of Rural Data Central. When you go to others' websites, they will only give you the margin of error, and you have to kind of calculate that yourself. And we've provided a stoplight signal here to give you a range of estimates as the data, high quality, low quality, or medium quality, or in some instances, we just can't calculate it. We can't calculate it at the census tract level. The coefficient of variation doesn't really work well at that level. And at higher levels of geography, we think the data are pretty sound as they are. I would just go on to add that the coefficient of variation again I think is an enhancement in this case, and again we appreciate the insight in that. You can find more information about that methodology within the platform. So again, thanks for the question. It is highly relevant, and I would say it's particularly relevant in this scenario where we talked about we tried to build Rural Data Central with unabashedly rural-centric dynamics, right? Oftentimes data is looked at from an urban or suburban-centric perspective, and these reliability estimates may be more relevant in a rural context where you have smaller geographies and smaller populations. We think they're more important here, and that's why we've worked to include them.
Okay, so I think another question is about census tract level data on the mapping system, and if we'll ever be able to get lower levels of geography showing on the map. So if you chose a county, could you see a census tract map within that county, even though the larger geography would overwhelm it?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Another great resource. I'm really excited about the dynamic mapping elements, but we are working on advancements for that as well. First of all, we want to make sure that we get the data right, and I'll give a good example here in a second to make sure that we have the mapping exactly correct. But yes, we are working on basically a filtering dynamic because we can't populate, the map automatically populates, and it would basically crash the system if we tried to populate a tract level map. It's just too large for the system. But when we do some level of filtering, that we could turn on census tract level variations at lower level geographies for smaller, more discrete areas. Another good example where we hope to have, and I hope I'm not promising too much here because I think we're right on the cusp. You'll notice, Keith noted this before, that we'll likely have mapping capabilities for the continuum of care homeless areas, but also tribal tracts. And I'd say that's a unique estimate, another unique element of Rural Data Central, where we provide tribal tract data, which are a proxy, a statistical proxy for many tribal areas, not all. We can go into the technical documentation to learn about that. We do not have the tribal tract shape files or geo files up, but we hope to have them very soon. We identified a few areas where there were concern. They were not populating correctly under the mapping source, and we wanted to make sure that we absolutely had that correct. So we are testing that and hope to have those mapping capabilities for continuum of care and tribal tracts very soon.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, another question is there any data available through this tool at the city level?
We do not provide data at the city or the place level. I would say, I'll just give a comparison, and I want to make one area where we do have data that I think is unique and new and is important and should be there. Cities are important in their own right, but at some point we're also up against size and space specifications. I'll give an example that I'd like to quantify just the work that we've done. So some earlier data, the first data portal, we don't know how many data points there were, but the comparison that this is an advancement of the old rural data portal that we launched in 2012, and it had about 3 million data points. Current Rural Data Central has 275 million data points and will increase by a couple of 100 million here in a couple of months. And at some point, we just run up against size specifications. So we do not include cities. They are important in some contexts, but we don't have that level of geography. One area of geography that I would point to is that in many instances, we really tried to include data for Puerto Rico. This is oftentimes disassociated in many other data sets, but we've tried to include Puerto Rico in most of the data sets where the data are available. We've combined Puerto Rico in, and sometimes they are segmented outside of the United States. And Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so we've included that where we can. So that's one example where we don't have some data, but we thought it was important to include Puerto Rico. So just an example there, Dan.
So question from Douglas Hall, speaking like a true nonprofit pro. Are there any specific funders we should extend appreciation for supporting this important work?
So yes, thank you. There have been many individuals involved in the development of Rural Data Central. More recently, we would like to thank Truist Bank for their support and advancement. Actually, there's resource and funding from both public and private resources, and we'll have that up on the website soon as when we get some feedback from some of those funders. But thank you for that. We appreciate you extending those thanks and gratitude, and we'll get back with you on that.
Okay. Another question about, I think the mention of Puerto Rico prompted how about data sets for U.S. territories in the Pacific Basin?
We do have some. Those data are not as widely available and integrated into the system. Again, talking about advancement. But correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. There should be data on what's classified under USDA terminology, the West Pacific territories, under the USDA resources in the housing module. I believe they might be in that data set. Maybe not. We do receive some of those data, but largely it is at this point we have data for among the territories. We have data for Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I think the USDA might be one of the only ones. Sometimes they report for some of the territories other than Puerto Rico for mortgage lending, but it's not regular. But yeah, no, and actually we're doing some work on an area, likely one of the territories, some data work. But yeah, that's an area definitely I think needs to improve, like Guam and some of the other territories.
So I don't think we have any other questions coming in at this moment. And so I think if we are ready to wrap up, if no one has anything else, Lance, I'll hand it over to you to close
No,
this out.
thank you, Dan. Just simple thank yous. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. A big thank you to Keith, Stephanie, and Dan. There was a lot of work that's gone into this over, I will have to say, a long period of time. And at the end of the day, just like anything at Hack, we want this to be relevant, accessible, and usable to you, and we want to work towards that. We know there can be improvements made, and we welcome that feedback and that information. But again, I just want to say thank you, and don't hesitate. We really do value the feedback. As you can discern, we love to talk about data, so we're happy to engage in those conversations. But once again, thank you again, and we look forward to continuing the discussion and improving Rural Data Central and the work that you're doing. And most of all, thank you for all the work that you're doing with Rural Data Central. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
If you see anything, just let us know. Any ideas?